Welcome to Revenue Mind, where revenue leaders get real about mental health. I'm Julie. Stick around for honest stories, practical insights, and why well-being is the real bottom line. Let's dive in. Welcome to Revenue Mind, a podcast where revenue leaders talk all about mental health. I'm Julie, your host, and with us is Justin. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you for having me and happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I know it's been a little bit on my end with the scheduling, so really appreciate you making it. First question that I don't really prep people for a reason. What makes you you?
That is good question. And I'm sure I could take this a variety of different routes, but I guess my first response would be I'm a product of a few things. The home I grew up in, the parents, kind of my surroundings, but at the core of who I am, I guess my essence, I'm a very logical, motivated person. I'm a very much kind of, I would say, a defender. I don't have a ton of deep relationships, but the people that I am close with, I would defend with my life. I'm very loyal. Integrity and honesty is something that's very important to me. I'm very sarcastic and kind of, I probably don't take enough things seriously enough. I make jokes about things I probably shouldn't, but I'm a very, very logical person, very much a few relationships, but deep. And then, yeah, I guess very self motivated, self driven. I'm an obsessive. I latch onto things. Once I'm latched onto something, I go deep and can't let it go, which probably was why startups make sense, why tournament poker before that made sense, why video games would, what it did deep into. But I would say roll that craziness into a ball, and that's pretty much the essence of who I am.
I was laughing because I'm like, oh my God, we're the same person. It's like I get so deep into things that I care about. It's like, it's crazy. I feel like that's definitely a founder's mentality. I've talked to, who did I talk to about it? I think it's Mac Redden. Like we all have the same like founders, like just you're obsessed and it's like a drug. And it's
Yeah.
just, but I love the essence. It's awesome. It's really,
Trying to use our drugs for good
yeah.
instead of now.
Yeah. It's like, we're not alcoholics. We're just drug addicts to our founding startups.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There we go. So moving on. First question. Let's dive in. You ready?
Hmm.
Cool beans. All right. So speaking of restaurants, you left the restaurant after a burnout crash. Can you pinpoint the exact moment that made you say, enough, it's time to set healthier boundaries?
Yeah, I can pinpoint it to it was kind of building up. So the restaurant industry in general is kind of intense. You're locked in a building for 8 to 10 hours on a good day, 12 to 14 hours on a bad day. I was a restaurant manager, and so I was the restaurant general manager, and I was a training manager. So I was responsible for training salaried managers around me and helping staff other stores. It got to the point where they were taking people from my store and putting them in other stores, which felt great at first, but then over time it became a cycle where I felt like I was just being used for spare parts and I was constantly being short staffed and I was constantly compensating to the point where I think, yeah, my breaking point was, I think, 3 or 4 18-hour days back to back to back in a restaurant that basically didn't like was open 24/7. So I was there from like 5 in the morning till about 3 a.m. the next day and then back in 3 days in a row because of how epically short staffed we were. And kind of like contributing to my own problems to some degree by letting my people go to other stores. So after that, my aspirations of moving up in that company were pretty much done. I really just wanted to focus on rebalancing my life there. I started saying no to my boss on a regular basis, which I had never done before, which took, promotion paths off of my plate. But at that point, I didn't, I just wanted mental sanity and to not feel the way I did. But yeah, that was kind of an extreme, and it was a combination of things. It was that path I was on. Plus, at that time, I was an immature leader, so I believe I was viewing people as kind of numbers on the spreadsheet to achieve a goal, and running, not being able to keep maybe the top talent or not being able to keep and attract people on top of everything else that was going on. So that was probably the roughest. And then after that, that kind of reframed everything of what am I willing to do? What am I willing to say yes or no to? What are my boundaries? How do I protect myself? Up until then, I was just saying yes to everything. I thought that was and that had gotten me to that point in my career of never saying no to my bosses, not having boundaries, being that, company person. So that's kind of when and where it changed for me.
That's amazing. When I was at 6 Sense, what was the phrase? It was something along the lines, Latin used to say it, say no to say yes. What I've learned from all of you is just how to set boundaries because time is the most precious commodity, as corny as that saying is. But
Yeah.
I feel like that really you really embody that, which is great. I know you post a lot about mental health and boundaries and all that, but which actually brings us to our next question. You've carved out time islands on your calendar. What's the one instance when that protected slot saved your day and your sanity?
I think it's almost on a weekly basis because what I feel like is if your calendar is just open, it'll get filled up with stuff, and then you're just kind of a slave to your calendar. And especially, yeah, time is precious, and I think that's always been true. And that sounds corny, but especially when you're either a leader of a team or a founder of a company, like you need some protected time away from the day to day operations to be able to take a step back with some perspective and space to think about things on a higher level. And if not, like you're just going to be in the weeds. You're just going to be. So I think one of the things I did was I started building these little buffers. Like on Wednesdays, I typically don't take any meetings internally or externally, like afternoon. And then on Fridays, I usually end my day early as far as like I stop having calls after a certain point. And on Mondays, I try to give myself some buffer in the mornings to not take, calls or have things so that coming out of the weekend, getting started, I'm not just thrust into the week. I have some protected time to maybe help plan or to take some of that buffer. So a lot of times, like I would say, like that has saved me and probably more times than I can realize because up until I started doing that, I really felt like, yeah, during the day, you're just doing what you have to do. And then you come back nights, weekends, doing all the stuff that maybe like actually moves the business forward. And so any way possible, and I'm not saying that is actually still how it is for the most part, but any time that I can actually try to bake into my actual daily schedule to have more of that balance or just mental sanity, then that works great. And it's made a visible impact on myself for that. And I would advise others to do something similar, like curate your weekly experience to something that like makes sense. I guess the other thing I did was like I try not to have 3 days in a row where I'm just open to have calls from like, open to close or whatever. Like, so if I have, one day that I'm completely taking a lot of calls and Tuesdays tend to be a really busy day, on Wednesday should be a light day. Thursday can be a heavy day again. Friday should be a light day. And that balance, I think, has had a big mental difference for me.
That's awesome. Your world revolves around high impact LinkedIn ads. How do you keep your edge in performance and well being when the pressure is on?
The big thing I realized is, yeah, there's this pressure to like keep cranking out like posts and ideas and creativity. And if you're, and I guess like, yeah, if that's the task and that's how I'm thinking about it, you can get burnout on that. You can get like just crappy ideas flowing out of you because your heart's not in it. So, and I think I'll credit Finn Thurmeyer. I probably butchered his last name, but he's pretty active on LinkedIn. One of his mottos is, about like philosophizing on how to keep a consistent organic motion on LinkedIn. He says, do cool shit and write about it. But basically, the essence is like, if you're doing the work, if I'm tinkering in accounts, I'm experimenting, I make time to be able to run experiments, try things that creates endless opportunities for content. But if I'm not hands on, if I'm not experimenting, and then I'm literally just trying to like think of like cool stuff to write about without inspiration or without like hands on practicality, like yeah, that becomes like an unmanageable chore. But if I'm doing stuff, and I guess I'm stealing this also from Gary Vee, documentation versus like content creation, like that's way easier to think about. And so, yeah, all of my best posts, I would say, isn't like me sitting in a dark room trying to come up with some clever idea. It was like me working on my own business, figuring something out, and then writing about that. And it happens to help other people facing the same issue. So that would be, yeah, my best advice as well.
That's awesome. I feel like we're learning so much from each other. Yeah, Adam from I think it's Fibbler. I think that's his new company.
Yeah,
Built in
Hub
Public.
Graden or something.
Yeah, I can't. I'm not even gonna try his last name. I think it's Holmgren,
Yeah,
possibly. I'll ask
better
him.
than men.
But what do you actually, this is more of a side question, but what do you think about building in public? Like, especially if you've like a stealth startup, like, what's your opinion on that?
It's a bold move, but I think it's if you have thick skin and if you can take constructive feedback, because the best and worst part about building in public is that you'll get called out when you're wrong. And ideally, in a perfect world, you're building in public and you're making great smart choices and you make yourself look great. But be prepared for when you're building in public and you make stupid decisions, when you say something that shows your immaturity in an area, and don't take it so personally when someone points out, because I've run into that. I came from the restaurant industry and then I came into the marketing industry. And on some levels, by my own right, I'm an expert in certain areas. And on other levels, I am an absolute amateur figuring things out. And so, some of that can get exposed and I have to be open to that feedback. And then how I handle that, or how you handle that in public when you're getting that feedback on your post, can say a lot about you and either turn people on or off to you. So I do like it. And overall, like if you commit to that, I think it's a net positive as long as you as an individual handle the situation respectably over time, because it can get dicey.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. I like to consider myself like an ideas person. I mean, not that everything's unique and like a lot of things been made before, but like I'll be talking with like a friend, quote unquote on LinkedIn, and we're like, oh, that could be a business, stuff like that. But when it
Yeah.
comes to, so really good at strategy, really good at teaching myself and studying, but actually the hands on keyboard and actually doing the tools, I never learned.
Hmm.
So theoretics all day, strategy all day, ideas all day, but I wouldn't be able to write like a ebook on how to do technical implementation. But I know that about myself. And I think when you
Yeah.
know your limitations, to your point, like you can hire people that are smart in those areas and are very proficient, and then you can stand out in what you're best at.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. And yeah, lean into your strengths, I guess, is another startup superpower, because you can't be good at everything. You can be a good coder, you could be a good marketer, you could be good at business ideas, you could be good on the financial side. It's very rare that someone's even good at two or three out of, the dozen things that are necessary in any given field. So knowing what you're good at and leaning into that. Because over time, like I consider myself now, a lot of people know me as the like LinkedIn ads. I consider myself a broad marketer. Yes, I go deep on LinkedIn ads. I know enough to be dangerous about the other channels, but then in each of those channels, there's deep experts who have more knowledge on any given channel. But I pride myself on I can put those channels together better than any individual expert, and better than most broad spectrum marketers. So trying to figure out where your center of genius is and focusing on that, I think is great advice.
Yeah, for sure. And being a founder can be incredibly stressful. What's one unexpected habit you swear by to manage stress during those high octane revenue crunch days?
I guess one of the things that I would say is you do need to find ways to disconnect. It can be easy to just stay almost just in the grind, in whatever the weeds of it is. And from that perspective, things always seem, a lot more dire. So sometimes just disconnecting, going for a run or walk out in nature, just trying to really disconnect and spend time somewhere else, playing a video game, doing something to try to segment your mind away from that business. Like I used to play video games like all growing up. I came from a gamer family. I don't play like computer or console games really anymore. I have like Mobile Legends or something, like a 5-on-5 strategy game. Like, and if I play that, like I literally disconnect from like whatever was stressing me out of the day, and have that disconnect. But and I really enjoy walks and runs outside in nature. I feel like that's highly therapeutic for my brain. It's almost like a green scrub of my brain, I imagine. But finding some way to disconnect, finding some hobby or enjoyment or something outside of the work that you can disconnect, because a lot of times that will help you reset, help you rebalance, and also a lot of times you'll have better perspective to come back and tackle a problem. Whereas if you never leave the zone, sometimes you just go in these inefficient cycles and you're taking 3 or 4 times as long to solve a problem because you're just like too close to it, and not taking a step back.
Yeah, I feel like that's the zoom in, zoom out. approach, and it's so hard. I mean, even though I said, I'm very strategic and not super hands on keyboard, I tend to hyper focus. And when you're so in the weeds, it's so hard to be like, wait, let me back up. What was my vision?
Yeah.
Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And some things that, I mean, I've already talked about this on podcasts, but I'll just repeat it. Like having a life outside of work, I feel like is so important. I was talking to Jason Witta, and he actually says in his interviews, what do you do for fun? And if they don't have a hobby, he doesn't hire them, which I found really like awesome.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Cause I mean, like, life is so short, you know? I mean, if we're all like, it's amazing to have a mission driven or purpose driven or, something that you're really passionate about, like you or me or, XYZ founders that I've talked to. But if we don't have life outside of it, what's the point?
Yeah. It also adds like context and character and perspective, like someone who doesn't have other things going on. Like, well, I think, like having having family and having kids, like that has taught me a lot about perspective and time management, even more ruthless time management than I had to have before. And also just like perspective too, like, like from my kids' point of view, like dad works and we pay for these things. Like they don't necessarily care what I do, and this side of my life is not that important to them. And yet, this can be all consuming and all. But like yeah, and it's a little different. Like if it's your startup, like because you can't just say like I work to live, and instead of like living to work, like running a startup can feel like you're living to work sometimes. But it's yeah, the balance is that you're making conscious decisions and trade offs for future payouts or accelerated knowledge and also yeah I guess the way our brain is wired, like having such full gripping engagement into what you're doing is somehow weirdly satisfying for us versus like a job that's 9 to 5 and like they would miss you if you were gone and like that's that yeah they can be different.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm right there with you. Well, with a lot of startups, when they're investor backed, I'm not sure if this is the case for you, but when targets loom large, how do you force yourself to choose a good night's sleep or a nature break over the endless calls?
Yeah. And I would say, yeah, it is different. It's not. So I remember like when I was bootstrapped and it was just me, like I would have sleepless nights, like trying to figure out payroll, trying to like wonder, if this dip is gonna stick or if we're gonna come out of it. I was taking out some PayPal working capital loans and then I feel like it was a never ending roller coaster. And then you take that and then either, yeah, if you're investor backed or PE backed or whatever, like the goals get bigger. It's almost like for my poker days, it's like you're staked at a table that's at a much higher level than what you're normally playing at. So the stress and the risk and everything is at a different level. So I would say that that contributes to that and just raises the stakes on everything. And I guess sometimes I might have to take a walk or disconnect in order to be able to get a good night's sleep because otherwise like sometimes you just lay down and your mind will not stop racing and so it just can't shut off and you feel like there's critical problems you can solve. So I guess some of the stuff that I would do like in those scenarios would be like I almost just have to like tell myself like you are not going to solve this problem right now, like there is nothing you can do right now. Spending another hour in the dark thinking about this will not solve it, like and if I thought you could solve it, I'd let you continue on this road. You will not solve it. This is pointless. Like force yourself to think about something else and drift away to sleep because you're not helping your situation right now. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If it's a critical problem, it can be really hard to like talk yourself out of obsessing over that.
Definitely. What is that quote from House that my fiance always says? It's like when you're asleep, you solve problems that you can't when
Mm.
you're awake.
I've heard that. And a lot of people would say like that's what dreams are, is that it's your unconscious mind trying to like solve the problems of the day that we're lingering and working through some of those things. And can't remember ever like popping up with like a critical solve to my previous days like problems, but I would say more often than not, a good walk or a run has led to more breakthrough moments than almost anything else. Like if I try to disconnect and I take a walk with my dog or take a run, like sometimes I will have my absolute best ideas out there.
For sure. I have a really random question, but do you like video games? It sounded like you did.
I grew up in my dad was an IT specialist for or a network specialist for a school system. We had LAN parties. He would bring home the computers. We play Total Annihilation, Command and Conquer, StarCraft, all those games. And then I got big into consoles, played Need for Speed and all the fighting games and all of that. And then in my adult, I played World of Warcraft and was really big into that for a decent chunk of time. And that's actually where I learned automation for the first time. I learned how to bot characters to levels and I started selling them for cash. And that's kind of one of the how I stumbled into automation for lead gen that led to my first company. But then now I play Mobile Legends on my phone or tablet, 5-on-5 strategy. I feel like it engages my mind. But yeah, I would say I fit in that category.
Cool. So we talked a little bit earlier before about saying no. Tell us about the boldest no you ever gave at work and how that single moment reshaped your leadership style.
Yeah, I would go back to my restaurant days. So after I had that breaking point, I had never told my bosses no to anything. And then it came to a point where there was a general manager at a restaurant that had dropped off and they needed someone to go step in and fill that gap for an unknown period of time. And it was 45 minutes away. So it'd be a 45-minute commute. My normal commute was 5 minutes. And then the store was probably twice the volume because it was new and in a big whatever district. And he teed me up. Actually, it was my birthday. Teed me up and said, "Hey, this is what's going on." It wasn't even an ask. It was, "I need you to do this. I'm not sure for how long, and then this is the plan." Because to his point, like I had never said no, so there's no reason to like think I would have said. But after that, like because of everything I'd gone through at that point, like I was over it, and I said, no, I'm sorry, but I'm going to stay here. I have someone that would be willing to go help out there for a little bit, but even then, I don't want to loan them out of my store. He was completely speechless. Did not expect that from me. It really did start to fracture our relationship, and they got a little petty at first for a little bit of time. Like eventually, everyone like calmed down, but yeah, that was probably the biggest one, and I felt terrified to say no because they always position these things like, "Hey, you're going to be so helpful. Everyone's going to love this. This is going to look great on you, whatever." But I had heard that so many times over the last like year and a half. Yeah, just so I said no. And then it was like a domino. There was like a handful of things over the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Hey, we need a shift lead for this store. Hey, we need a manager. And like they were asking, okay, if you're not willing to go, can we still continue to have like your people moving on? And I basically was saying, no, these people are going to stay in my store. We're going to work on our numbers. We're going to focus on building our environment here. And I didn't know what the consequences were going to be. I didn't know if they could just force me to do that or if they were going to force these people to go, or if I was going to like get removed or pushed into some village. But so that was really scary for me, but it kind of worked out. I mean, it killed my career with that company, but it all kind of worked out because from that and with that sense of confidence, like I had this eventually it all settled down and I'm like, "Oh, like they can't make me do this and they're not going to do anything about it and I can just stay here and my team can stay here and we can like build our own store and that's an option." I mean, sure, I don't get promoted now, but I don't even care about that anymore. So, it eventually worked out beautifully and that mindset carried on after that. And I give people the same advice like almost any job in the world, they need you more than you need that job. And so you look for your points of leverage and how you can leverage that because guaranteed, like if you're a decent person, they need you more than you need that job or that company. So use it.
Great. So, how did that help you build a team culture at your own company, Impactable, that shows everyone their well being matters?
Yeah. So I guess that's one of those things coming from the restaurant world where I didn't have levers such as like being able to pay very competitive wages to build a team. The only thing I had was kind of culture and flexibility. So if we treated people as decent human beings, if we were as flexible as humanly possible on their needs and schedules, and if we, helped give people experience like, yeah, because I didn't have pay as a leverage. I had to be really creative of how I could keep and maintain a talented team to help me achieve goals. So that mentality now when I came over into the marketing world and I started hiring and I started seeing like, what other agencies are charging for these services, I said, okay, well, geez, like I didn't realize how much money was being thrown around in other industries coming from service or restaurant, and everyone's getting paid minimum wage. You go into the tech world or the marketing world, and it's like, oh, I could afford to hire decent, talented human beings and pay them, a competitive wage. And then on top of that, I can treat them like good human beings and provide flexibility with schedule. And then, yeah, I've always had this one philosophy with building the restaurant and then with the lead gen agency and now in the ads agency. Like most skills can be taught. The big thing that can't be taught is like, are they decent human beings with integrity that you can trust and will treat clients and each other with respect? And if I can find that, I can teach them the necessary skills to be successful with our business. But that's been one thing that I've latched onto, and we have a great team, good culture, people treat each other with respect, and that matters a lot with us.
That's amazing. That reminds me, it doesn't matter really where you come from. You can be any income, any job title, any
Yeah.
seniority. There are a lot of people that are good people, but they're really out for themselves and are mostly selfish. But there are a lot of people that are selfless and they want to give back. And I think what you're doing is awesome. Building that, fostering that culture where team members are also inspired to be those type of people.
Yeah, and I'd agree. There's a lot of people who are good human beings, but there's also like a big group of people who have good intentions, but are still kind of really toxic in like work environments because like they don't have tact, they don't have self awareness, they're kind of a little too self involved, and it's really hard to discipline them because it's like they don't have bad intentions, but almost doesn't matter because they do so many things that just like are like toxic clouds that create these like problems for people. So those are the ones like I'd rather them just be bad people and be easily identified. But like the good intentioned people who are kind of toxic, like that can be a challenge to deal with.
There's actually I talked with Vlad from Full Funnel. He was one of the first episodes, and he had a physical ailment, and he ended up walking and walking and walking. And when he got outside, it actually, I mean, it didn't cure it, but it definitely helped. So there are studies. I actually read a study a while ago about hiking and being in nature and how it actually relieves anxiety, which is really cool
I believe it.
for sure. Cool. So, what would you say if you could write a note to your burnt out self?
So one of the biggest things I think I would say is that, you have value. Everyone has value beyond your current like status, like beyond your current title, beyond your current income, behind beyond that, like you have value. And I think that, not having perspective on that leads to a lot of actions that cause burnout. And I would say, your job needs you more than you need that job. That's true for 99% of people. And that inspires confidence and gives power. And I would say you can say no. You can say no and you can create boundaries. And because they need you more than you need them, they will, might argue over those boundaries, but you will be able to protect boundaries that give you the space that you need to, function properly. And then I guess I would also say, in all my experience, you know, the best thing you can do for your career or for your business is to take care of your mind and your body, and get enough sleep and drink enough water. Like those fundamental things actually do contribute to success. And so if you're neglecting all of those things to chase success, you're going to be, barking down the wrong tree, or you're going to be down a very inefficient path to get there. So, yeah, I guess I would probably incorporate some of those elements, just kind of empower and put things in perspective.
I love that. See, I'm in the opposite camp, being laid off 3 times in a row over the past 3 years. I definitely feel like I'm the first thing to get cut to save the bottom line. I don't think I'm the only person that feels that way. But I think when you're, especially with I mean, it really wasn't some, I've definitely made some mistakes, but with the tech recession and what's going on right now, and I think it's just really, really tough for people. But I like your perspective of if you can prove yourself to be invaluable, you might have a shot.
Yeah, I guess that's a different perspective in the face of like, yeah, all the tech layoffs and whatnot. Like that message doesn't quite hit the same for that group. And then, yeah, what would you tell that group? Because yeah, I'm sure at some point it does start to feel like I am just insignificant, or I am, maybe there is something. And I would say, like, yeah, I guess from that perspective, like, these companies who do these layoffs, like, they don't have, it's managed chaos at the best, and they don't have their shit together, and humans do pay the price, and that does have an impact on those humans' mental health. And I guess, yeah, I would still come back to, like, that does not define you. You're in a tough industry where these things happen, and you're at these companies who have to make these hard decisions because they miscalculate, and you're paying the price. So you're actually paying the price for someone else's mistake, not your inferiority, or something. And yeah, I guess that I'd have to give a lot more thought to that. But that's a different perspective, and not something I was a part of too. So yeah, I guess I didn't factor in or shape mine, but that's a really good point that my message probably wouldn't resonate super well with people in that group.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time. Where can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Rowe. Should be one of the more visible ones there. You can also visit our website, impactable.com, LinkedIn ads agency. We offer support in some other channels. And also our YouTube channel. If you look up Impactable or Justin Rowe on YouTube, I think I have like 300 plus videos. There's how to's to do all of the LinkedIn stuff that, people pay us to do. There's explainers of how to do that yourself. It's a really good knowledge source there. So yeah, probably those three are the best places to find me.
Thank you so much. I think our listeners are going to get awesome insights out of this. I really appreciate you being on.
I hope so. It was great to be here, and I felt like it was a good combo.
That's a wrap for Revenue Mind, where we cut the BS and spotlight mental health and revenue leadership. I'm Jolie, reminding you your mindset is your competitive edge. Thanks for listening. See you next time.